What up? I didn't cover this part of it, though I should have. I kept thinking about it and I forget to do the video. Okay, just to catch you guys up, there were already rumblings of what was going on with Aftershock Comics before they had filed for bankruptcy. There were talks, people that were admitting to not getting paid. There are artists, writers, etc. But they weren't the only people that were being mentioned. As far as late payments, it was like people that were across the spectrum. We know that there were certain companies that would not get named, and we know who those are, big dogs. But as far as these major indies or major other publishers, they're dealing with the same problem. Some of them have been mentioned. Valiant got mentioned by one of these artists calling it a deadbeat. I think it was like a deadbeat company or something of that nature. But there's another company that it's looked at as somehow or somewhat leading the charge in like some of the independent content, independent comic creation that are having some of the same problems as far as paying artists. It's not just a mainstream thing. It's a lot of these guys are kind of in on this, though they cycle through the same talent. This is why I don't really like it. I use it because people can understand what it is that I'm talking about. When you use indie, you basically are saying not Marvel and DC, but they all cycle through the same content or the same like creatives and what have you. But Comics Beat covered this. Heavy Metal was also mentioned, and it's like financial issues, right? A story on All Weeks. I'm reading this from Comics Beat, by the way. I think Heidi McDonald wrote this. A story on All the Week's news at Publishers Weekly by Calvin Reid. Reid has more on the Heavy Metal situation with CEO Matthew Mitney. The reality is that a supply chain of errors created this situation. These are industry-wide issues that are affecting all independent publishers, and we need to have a conversation about how to fix these issues. He said, to fix its situation, HM has hired this Heavy Metal, Joseph Durko, an experienced management executive, as CFO, and initiated an in-house restructuring. As a result, the company has temporarily suspended payments to its creators and vendors. Mitney said that the company's owners are working to rectify the situation and that no one is leaving the company. They have about 15 staffers who are taking an extended holiday and will return in the new year. Mitney also noted that the company's current problems are unrelated to a recent partnership announced at New York Comic Con, in which Whatnot Publishing will take over the production, printing and distribution of Heavy Metal books and magazines. The partnership does not take effect. Now, it's like, okay, everybody knows there's issues with the industry in itself, but because the status quo has to be protected, you got people that kind of talk around it, right? It's like, oh, it's just a problem. Everybody's dealing with problems. And it's like, yeah, but that's a fundamental issue with how business is being ran. They're talking about hiring this person that's going to help with some of the internal stuff, but to suspend payments is something a bit hilarious that they're saying that will basically there's going to be there was people that just simply didn't get paid. There's other stuff that I want to talk about as well. Let me see if I can find this real quick. Here we go, right here. So they also mentioned this. Heavy Metal's catching up on invoicing over the holidays, right? So as news of Aftershock Comics bankruptcy filing spread yesterday, has also been breaking that, breaking that Heavy Metal is undergoing a reorganization after missing some payments to his creators. The company, which has a long legacy of publishing in the U.S., earlier announced the partnership with Twitch meets eBay auction company Whatnot. That saw Whatnot take over the printing and yada yada. We just covered that. However, rumors of slow payments, from Heavy Metal have been spreading of late. And people who wrote to the company inquiring about payments received a response from new CFO, Chief Restructuring Officer, and Corporate Secretary. So that's what they're calling. That's a fake job. But I guess he's going to come in and clean things up. Who said that payments were on hold. His website lists him as business management consultant, yada, yada, yada. You don't hire people like that unless you're in some trouble. Due to some receivables not being collected on time, our payments to his creators have slipped further than what's acceptable. Luckily, we have a dedicated commitment investor group. What? Whose support is allowing us to pay all creators before Christmas while catching up on our invoice. Okay, so they're trying to catch up on monies, and it looks like they have an investor group. So an external source is going to help them, and obviously everything has a price. Okay. Now, this is my thing. Y'all can sit up here and act like there's nothing going on with this industry, but a lot of it's smoke and mirrors, and it's been smoke and mirrors. Okay. It's just pretending that it's doing better than what it is because that's the status quo. It needs to exist. And if you wonder why so many people, even though they know it's a problem, why so many people like skirting around the issue? Why are they acting as if there's not a problem, right? Because no thirsty or rather thriving industry has this continued idea among several companies that are within it that are missing out on payments unless they're coming up short on the money, right? That's not thriving. You're not thriving when something like that's happening. Yeah, a missed payment or two is one thing, but having several creators talk about how this has become a standard lets you know that the well's dry. It was running dry at the very minimum, okay? The reason, though, why everybody's so like, everything's fine, $2.1 billion according to Comic Con and yada, yada. The reason why they do that, and then you look at the numbers and you see how many units sales are down, and they're taking credit for manga as well. But if the status quo, and I mean top to bottom, from the comic books, like the actual companies themselves, from the people that report on this stuff, retailers, if the status quo changes, there's going to be uncertainty in all of what I just mentioned. And to be honest, because it was on faulty ground anyway, and it was bound to tip over or at some point, people aren't going to make it on the other side, okay? A lot of y'all are going to be without jobs. A lot of y'all are going to be in trouble as it starts to rebuild itself to something that's more caught up with the times. Your economic model's archaic. It's old. It's outdated. And as people continue to do what doesn't work, there are going to be those that are taking advantage of the fact that, well, the means have been decentralized now, right? I don't got to go through you to publish anything anymore. And people are starting to realize that. And newer companies that have an updated model, crowdfunding as an example, introduce something new to it as well. You got folks like myself who kind of have their own version of our own kind of campaign. We took the vision of what a crowdfund will look like, but we didn't crowdfund. You have that aspect, like people being able to adjust to the times. And that's because, again, the means are decentralized. Like this information, this internet in general allows people to learn more about stuff that they may have not known about. Okay. People that grew up on this as well. And they now are in a position to do things themselves where previously in other decades, you had to go through other people. So the folks that are still operating from the status quo benefited the most from it. Of course, they're going to fight like hell to defend it. But you are pretending, if you act like the comic book industry, the American comic book industry ain't declining. As you get your tails kicked by manga in your own, field, really, in your own space, in your own country, continent. Okay? When you have to find ways to try to look at the fact that, well, see it as a victory when the unit sales are down. More titles being created, unit sales down. When you see that across the board, people aren't getting paid. When you see all of this stuff, you don't want to be forced to view the reality. And that is that you are in decline. And you can adjust. But understand that some of y'all have no worth. There's no true value on the other side of it. There will be those that will make it on the other side, but some of y'all not. Because things are going to change. fundamentally change. You have a direct line of sight with your audience. You actually get to see now, because of that, who's actually liked, right? Is it just likes and retweets and nostalgia, or is it people have genuine interest in the content that you're creating, your books that you're making? You're starting to see that. You see a lot of guys, right? Guys do stuff. They go out on their own, try to do an independent comic, and it doesn't do much because they can't tie it to like a massive character with a massive IP and convince retailers to buy it. We'll see. But you better update your model. But more importantly, screw that. Most importantly, acknowledge the problem. You can't come up with a solution unless you acknowledge the problem. Acknowledge it. Now, some of y'all have done yourselves in, right? Everybody's kind of participated in the industry being in the way that it is. And you have your own places of why it's screwed up. Right? Just because a lot of these creatives are complaining, I don't think they're rid of any sort of blame, not just in bad content, but these sort of cancellation tours that you guys go on. You facilitated a industry that has left y'all broke, and some of y'all actually, deserve it in some cases. Not necessarily contractually, right? People, you agree to do something, people should pay you. But I'm saying y'all ain't like the most moral people. I don't want the comic book industry to fall flat on its face, but at this rate, it certainly will. And there will be those of us that get on the other side of it. That's why I said the other day, y'all can have the likes and the retweets. Give me the money and the sales and the paying customers. Wherever you're viewing the content, I appreciate you. If you enjoyed it, you may be interested in my comic book company, Rippaverse Comics. Our first book and campaign, ISOM #1, brought in $3.7 million with tens of thousands of satisfied customers. Visit Rippaverse.com to check out our store and stay up to date with the latest campaigns from one of the hottest new comic book companies. Also, my first big step towards a parallel economy was the development of my personal website, ericdjuly.com. This entirely replaced my Patreon. Now, if you enjoy this content, please consider becoming a member over at the website. We have an ever-expanding list of perks for various membership tiers, a forum, and a phone app. Some of these perks will even benefit you if you're fans of the Rippaverse. Anyway, I appreciate you so much for being a supporter and or customer. I even got a little love for my haters.